I'd like to call our meeting to order for this evening.
Oh, good. Brian just arrived, so.
All right. My comment from the chair, whatever, might be a little silly, sometimes is foolish, you might say. But 2021 comes in, feels a lot like 2020. Doesn't feel like we've really put 2020 behind us, in the rear view mirror after we celebrated New Year's and our hopefulness for 2021. So question I was going to ask is, with the vaccines rolling out, with that process, ramping up, when do you think we'll be back together? What is your prediction? What is your crystal ball? What is your gaze? When will we be back for our first in-person meeting together as a public facilities district?
Whoa.
Want to volunteer?
Aaron, you spoke first.
I did. Late third quarter, early fourth.
All right.
I'd agree with Aaron. I think too, even if the governor lifts it, there's the question of those who got the vaccine and those who didn't. So I'd go with Aaron, probably early fourth quarter.
I'm a little more optimistic. I say July.
Yeah, I'm with Walt. I'm hoping the summer.
I'll share with everybody the same thing. My neighbor girl has said, well, 2020 was just training, I guess. Welcome to 2021. May the odds be ever in your favor. So I think I'll see you in 2022.
Ooh. All right.
Ooh, that's pessimistic.
Tom?
I'm going to be overly optimistic more than all of you and say May.
Hey, all right. All right. Well, I was going to say that exact same line, but say June. So I'm hoping maybe. I'm maybe more wishing than thinking, but that's what I'll go with. Brian, you want to weigh in?
I've been wrong on about every prediction on COVID so far. So with that disclaimer, I'm hoping July, like somebody else said.
All right. And Mike?
Yeah, I think it'll be June, July. Governor Inslee keeps pushing the prohibition on face-to-face meetings out every time the deadline comes up. And as long as we're in this current spike, it's got to come well down before he relieves that. So yeah, I think it'll be June at least.
All right.
Should have asked what the prize is for winning.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. We'll think about that one. Let's approve our minutes.
A used mask.
What's that?
A used mask.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Meetings from our December 14th meeting. Can I have a motion?
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I motion to accept the meeting minutes as presented. For December 14th.
Okay, I've got some corrections.
Uh-oh.
It's always
all
me.
right.
Sorry, guys.
We've got a motion by John, a second by Tom, and Aaron. Please commence.
Okay, so under number 2, meeting minutes, just give Walt Draper a capital D for his second name. Under number 5, financial reports, B, the expense blanket voucher. It covered that there had been a payment of the $981.18 and submitted a $4,830 voucher, but then it says that we approved a $5,291.86, and I can't remember why that math doesn't work.
I'll have to go back and check and make sure we get the right number.
Okay, double check that one. And then number 7, ongoing business, part C, the Port of Bremerton Phase 3 discussion. In the highlighted section that starts, Aaron Lita moved that the KPFD provide $1,439 million of funding. So unless we sold a lot of stuff, I think that's supposed to be a 1.439.
Yeah.
And then there's no comment as to who seconded that. I thought we should just fill that in. And then I think, and I don't know if this is on everybody's minutes, but the third page that printed for me was from another minutes, like in October. So that just needed to be eliminated. It noted that the next regular meeting of the board was December 7th, and this was the meeting from December 14th.
Good.
Got those? That's what I got.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other comment? Any other discussion?
Motion to accept as amended.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay.
We have a second.
Let's do it just to make sure if it needs a second for the amendment. But John has revised his, amended it, and Tom, will you, since you were the second, also
I
just
will.
be the same person?
Sure.
All right, thank you. And then all those in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Minutes have been approved. All right, we have a time for public comment. If you would, please raise your hand. For those of you who are in the attendees column, and we will give you 3 minutes. Again, we ask that you would keep your public comment to 3 minutes. At that time, we will stop you just to make sure that we can spread it to as many people as who want to speak. Any public comment? You can also write something in the chat and we can pick it up that way if you're having problems figuring out how to raise your hand.
I didn't see a chat option.
Q&A.
That's true. The Q&A is open. I don't have access to write a question, but maybe hopefully people in the attendees section do.
I don't see any Q&A answers or Q&A questions.
Do people have would someone who is in the attendees there, thank you for testing that, Shannon. Appreciate it. Thank you, Lori. So it looks like we don't have anyone who would like to speak for public comment. So we will move forward to our agenda item number 4, our regional project status reports, and invite Mayor Patansu and Nick Bond to come on and give us an update on the Port Orchard project. Mike, would you allow them into our
Hang on one
webinar?
Yep, hang on 1 second. Let me get over there. Mayor Patansu promoted. Steve Rice promoted.
Nick Bond won't be joining us, but Steve Rice and Lori Limson Cook will be joining me.
Okay.
From, Rice Fergus Miller. As soon as Lori gets here, I'll give you my little update, and then Steve's got a brief presentation.
Lori Cook.
Yep, Lori Cook.
Okay. So promoted.
Wonderful. So thank you for allowing me to join you this evening. Things are going very, very well with our project. And I want to apologize for the confusion. There isn't a need to amend the ILA, and that ended up on your agenda. We didn't get that figured out till late last week after your agenda got published, that we're still in task 2. And we're just going to give you a progress report. The feasibility study that the city has planned will be completed at the end of task 2 when we do our next check-in. And then we'll hopefully, and I have every confidence we'll be moving to task 3. So where we're at today, we've selected a site, and the Rice Fergus Miller team will talk to you about that and that process. I have letters of intent that I shared with Mike from the bank related to their property and the site we've selected, and as well as from Kitsap Regional Library and the school district, who is wanting to participate in this project also. We have a capital request into the legislature for $1.2 million, which is a piece of many grants that we'll be pursuing. We had, over the holidays, we had a boring machine on our waterfront for another project. And since that machinery was mobilized, we saw an opportunity, and we spent about $10,000 in city resources to do some borings on the perimeter of this site. And we got very good news that the bedrock is only about 10 or 15 feet down. And so that was one of our concerns, whether or not that bedrock was quite deep and what the pilings would be needed. And we also recognize we have a master planning project going on for our downtown. It's about a $200,000 master planning project for the county campus and all of our downtown. And when we got the stakeholders together for the master planned project, which is the community center is part of, we recognized some disconnects. And so we tomorrow night's city council meeting has a additional scope to the tune of about $25,000 that the city will be undertaking to make sure that when we get to our master planning process for all of downtown, that the uses and the code and everything meshes well with what we're considering for the Kitsap Bank headquarters and the community center. We don't want to have any disconnects there. The city also has on its agenda tomorrow night an appraisal. We're starting an appraisal process to value the Kitsap Bank property, so that we know when we go to our feasibility study, we know what we're looking for in as it relates to a price or what we should be paying for that piece of property. So this is our check-in with you before we move on to schematic design. And with that, I will hand this over to Steve Rice.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Commissioners. Nice to see all of you. I'll just keep this short. Lori's going to walk you through more quickly sort of what we accomplished and what is happening next. But I just want to make a couple of comments about the process so far. There's been just a ton of really great coordination between the parties. You know, this project was proposed as sort of what the mayor and I have come to call a three-legged stool, with the community event center, of course, being the leading leg of that stool. Also headquarters work for Kitsap Bank and private development work envisioned as multifamily housing, retail, and parking. And when the site was selected, you could just see the energy start spinning up. I think the other parties were really, waiting to see officially kind of where this selection led. And so we've been having stakeholder meetings with those other proponents, and there's a lot of coordination going on, and it's just really great to see. Last thing is, the mayor mentioned that they are having work done with what's called a sub-area plan in downtown Port Orchard. Our project and the entire master plan for the three-legged stool are all working together. Our firm is pledged to coordinate with and work with the planning firm that the city selected to do that work. And we share some pedigree together, our firm and their firm. We trace our roots back to where we all trained together in Seattle. So it's going to be fun to work with them a little bit. And I see nothing but really, really good outcomes for Port Orchard as a result of all of that. So that tees off very, very soon. I think we have a meeting set up this week. So I'll ask Lori to walk you through our number one task, which is completed, and looking forward to our number two task. And Lori, if you want to come online and take the mic from me, and I think she'll probably want to share her screen.
Yeah, I'm here. For some reason, my video won't turn on, but I'd like to share my screen. Mike, I think you need to give me permission to do that.
1 second.
I think you also have control of my camera, so don't think you want to see my face live.
I've promoted you to a co-host, which should allow you to share screen.
Let's see here. Yep. Okay.
Great.
That's good, Lori.
Good work.
All right. So like Steve just mentioned, there's a couple of things we wanted to mainly go through. One, what we've completed today, just to recap. And then two, what are we doing next? So let me start with this schedule here. So this is a schedule we shared with you the last time we were in front of you guys. Essentially, in the last year, we started out, preparing for public outreach. We did some preliminary site assessment based on information that was available on a number of sites that we were considering, which was narrowed down to 3 sites that we evaluated. We did a public outreach using an online survey, and then we did some preliminary designs, and then we had another public outreach where we presented those conceptual designs. We also worked with a committee to go through a site selection criteria, which led us to the final site that we've selected now. So that's what we've been up to last year. So now that we have a site that we've selected, along with some conceptual designs and program, we move on to the next phase, which is our based on the ILA Task 2, which essentially is the schematic design phase, is what we would call it in our world. Some of the items in that ILA are being discussed. Like there was some feasibility report that at some point the city will conduct, which will be a little later rather than right in the beginning. We already assessed the site alternatives, as I mentioned. So really the next step here is to dive into the investigation of the actual site that we've selected. I think some borings have begun for geotech. Our civil will be engaged to do a little bit more investigation. Then our design team will take that information and work on that schematic design to take the conceptual plans that you've seen to date further. And cost estimating is part of what we are doing in the next phase, as well as another round of public outreach. So this is the plan for the next 6 months to get us to a schematic design completion. And just as a refresh, this is the site that you guys have seen before, where the CEC was selected to be in the existing Kitsap Bank site. In this diagram, we've highlighted the 3 legs that Steve mentioned earlier, where you have the site where Kitsap Bank is proposed to go, and the other site where mixed-use residential and retail, as well as a parking garage, is intended. And the other 2 slides I have here is just a reminder of what the conceptual plan. Sorry, went too far. Here, the conceptual plan that we last presented, and we haven't done anything with that since last year. So this is where our opportunities to dive a little deeper into providing an actual floor plan and circulation and such. So that's all I had. Unless, Steve, is there anything else that I missed?
No, that's fine, Lori. If you hold it right there for a second, I did a calculation late last week on the acreage contained within the blue master plan line. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 acres. And then I did a little calculation on the rest of what I consider the downtown core, commercial core area of Port Orchard, and it was almost exactly a third. And it's interesting, we talked earlier about a transformational project and the role that the CEC plays in making all this happen. And it's a full third of Port Orchard's downtown. So it certainly has the label transformational for good reason. And I'll just close by saying, I've been working in the county for 33 years now, and our firm, as it's grown, has authored a lot of what I would call joint projects or joint use projects, where you have more than one owner working together on something. And they are inherently complicated. They're complex. They take a lot of effort and communication and coordination to pull off. And it's easy for things to go wrong. I'm just really impressed with what's going on in Port Orchard and how well everyone is communicating and sort of picking up and doing their part of this. And I think 2021 is going to be really amazing. We'll be designing this building the first half of the year, bring it to shape and form and materiality. We've had a preliminary cost estimate. We like where things are sitting with the projections that were done 2 years ago. And that's great news for this climate with COVID and all the upset that it has brought in the construction industry. And we are pledged to the city to keep our finger very squarely on the cost of this building as we go along to make sure that we don't waver. So only good news so far.
Thank you, Steve and Lori. Steve's right. This is complex. We've been meeting a lot with all the stakeholders and making sure we're addressing everybody's needs and concerns. And it's turned into quite a task in my schedule. So, but I'm up to it. And this is, a transformational project, and it's worth a significant commitment of my time. So we're charging hard. Appreciate your support and commitment to Port Orchard, and I'm available to answer questions for you.
Mayor Patansu, thank you for that update. Board, do we have any questions?
I have a question. I'm curious if the property acquisition phase has begun, and if you have an idea what the value of that property is, and if that's going to fall within your budget.
Looking at tax assessments, we've selected the most expensive piece of property in our downtown, which is also, that's why it's, right on the corner and it's right on the water, but it's the best site. There's no doubt about it. When we surveyed our community that helped us drive the process, I'd be speculating on, that's why we're going to do an appraisal. The city's going to step up and pay for an appraisal. That's our next step, so that we can make sure, it's not insurmountable. We might have to raise more money. That's really what the answer is. It's the right site. I'm confident of it. Our community and our surveys really told us how important a plaza and access to the water and the water and mountain vistas that this site offers are. It just checks all the boxes. And if we're going to get, part of this is going to have to come from possibly a Parks and Recs levy in our community to support the ongoing maintenance. And we don't have one right now. So we need to listen to our community, because they've got to get excited about this too, if we're going to be successful.
Just as a follow-up, thank you, Mayor. how many individual parcels are there, and what does the ownership of those look like?
Okay. The bank's we're only negotiating with the bank. And right now the bank also sits on a DNR sliver of DNR on the waterfront. And what we're proposing is to demolish the bank building, step back from the shoreline, and only beyond the building would be constructed on property we would own. The open space and the plaza out front will be on the DNR land, which is consistent with how DNR would like to see that property used versus having cars parked on it or buildings placed on it. So we're on the right path. We're gonna only be buying one piece of land. We will have to negotiate a lease with DNR, but it is consistent with how they want to see the property used.
Bank's going to give you a big discount though, right, Rob?
I don't think so. I used to work in the banking industry. John's laughing also. So bankers don't give you a deal. So
Any other questions?
it'll be a fair, and I mean, it's a public process. We're going to have an appraisal done. They're going to have an appraisal done, and, you know, we'll be in a place to, they have, as I've submitted to you, they have signed a letter of intent. They fully support selling their property to us and for the purpose of this project.
Yep, I saw that. Thank you.
All right. That looks like it's it. Thank you for that update. And we'll look forward to hearing more.
Wonderful. See you in 6 months or sooner.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Right.
Mike, as we transition here, would you put up our updated agenda?
Yeah, I'm just in the process of bringing the port people on board, and then I will do that. Okay, our updated agenda.
All right.
It's not the update. Yeah, it is. Okay.
So we are now moving into item number 5, which is the Port of Bremerton ILA discussion under new business. And from our previous agenda, we have basically flip-flop numbers 5 and 6 for time purposes to allow this discussion to happen next. So we are now on item number 5, Port of Bremerton ILA discussion and approval. Mike, would you like to give us an understanding of where we're at?
I can do that, but I think Brian has as good a grasp on that as anybody does, and he's been primarily in the negotiations with the port attorney. So this is a creation of the two attorneys, if you will.
All right, Brian, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you. So at the last board meeting, the board approved the concept of a $1.439 million contribution to public components of the Port of Bremerton Circuit Northwest project, specifically some design and construction documents. Thereafter, the port's attorney, Ann Montgomery, took the lead in drafting a new interlocal agreement, which was to match to the greatest extent practicable the form and substance of the interlocal agreements that we've entered into with Port Orchard, with the city of Paulsbo, and with Kitsap County for their regional facilities. So Ann Montgomery and I then exchanged a series of drafts back and forth. And I think as of late today, we've agreed on a form subject to really the board approval of business decisions that the lawyers have no business making. So as to the overall form and substance, we have an agreement that I say meets the standard that we've created for our regional centers. And then the business questions, and Mike, I can continue here or you can jump in, but the business questions are in section 5.2. Mike, do you want me to continue or do you want to jump in and
No, I can cover that. I think that the discussions have been between the port and ourselves and the board as to they were going to sell the bonds in order to pay for this up front. B, we were going to reimburse them, and our position was that we were going to reimburse them for the principal that they borrowed. What they had proposed in the suggested revision to what Brian's first cut was, they had the payment over time at 5 years with 3% interest. And I notice that in 5.2 right now, it's stated as still at 5 years, but at 0% interest, which is an improvement. But our response was over 10 years at 0% interest. And we had specific reasons for wanting to have that at 10 years rather than 5. Other items in the ILA were all pretty much acceptable. So that was the real sticking point at this level.
Mike, would you detail why it's important to have it at 10 years instead of 5 years?
Yeah, I think I can do that. Yeah, I do have another document here that was prepared latter part of last year and then updated since. Basically, what this summarizes is that we have current commitments to 3 other projects, and they're shown here in the center of the document. We're in phase 2, but I included phase 3, which will occur over the next 6 to 12 months, maybe into 2022, of $1 million to South Kitsap. The PERC, we only have 243,000 committed now, but in the first stages through 2022 is 2.2 million. And the Port Gamble Heritage Park is currently committed at 1.7 million. So the total of that is just under $5 million. For the PFD, we have our current cash position is at 3.3 million. Our estimated net cash over the next 2 years is an additional 1.7 million, giving us around $5 million in order to cover the committed portion of the other projects and what we have. The question is, where does that leave the Port of Bremerton project? If the port sells bonds at the 4 million, doesn't cost us anything up front. If we pay them back 1.4 million over 10 years, that's an additional $140,000 a year that could be factored into this total. If they pay the financing costs of their share of the cost, we would be able to absorb the $140,000 a year out of the approximately 750 or 800,000 that we would gain each year. But if we have to take $250,000 or $280,000 a year by paying them back over 5 years, then that puts a pinch into our ability to meet the commitments that we've made to the first 3 projects. So that was the basis of our requesting that this be paid back over 10 years.
Mike, would you also just have our financial advisors seen these numbers? Have they seen this outflow? Have they agreed to it? Are these their numbers? Are these your numbers?
These are my numbers. I have provided this to the the financial advisors. They have agreed in principle to this, but they have not done their own analysis and come back with anything different, but we can certainly ask them to do so.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have questions. So on the listing to come up to the 4.9, on the PERC project, we're listing it at 2.2 million, but we only have 243 on an ILA right now. So
that is correct.
Right. So we've got the 1.4 now on the ILA, or we will when we sign this, the ILA for Port of Bremerton. So we're kind of popping the Port of Bremerton out to keep money that we haven't awarded out for future use. I'm looking at it the other way and saying, why aren't we, taking the money that we're not sure we're going to be giving in a few years and doing the bonding over 10 years on that project, as opposed to the one that's breaking ground right now? Is there a reason why we're doing this?
Well, I'm going on the basis of what their projections and let's see. I think the Gantt chart that I did on this is on a different. Let me see if I can find that. But
I guess my question, it's not even so much timing and stuff. It's that we've got a commitment of 243 now. We have a commitment of 1.4 for Port of Bremerton. Why aren't the ones that are currently committed the ones that we're showing saying this is the money we've already committed? This is the stuff we think we're going to be committing. In other words, I don't understand why the two aren't swapped out for each other. Does anybody else have a thought on that?
I don't disagree with you in that we only have 243 on ILA for PERC right now, but that was only for their first phase. When that's complete, they're going to come back with what they want for the second phase, which is going to be the $2 million, and that's probably going to come in the latter half of this year. And
I understand that. I just
and I think we have to be aware that they were number 2 on our priority list. When we went through the whole process, and the project taking place at the Port of Bremerton was actually number 4. So I think we have to be vigilant to make sure that we have the resources for that number 2 project up at Paulsbo.
Yeah, I don't mind seeing the 2.2 there. I voted for the Bremerton one, but I think it's good to keep that in mind from a conservative standpoint, so it's there.
So rather than say when the Paulsbo project comes in for their next 1.9 or whatever, looking at them going over 10 years versus the one we just signed, and I'm just throwing it out there. We've made these commitments.
Well, if we did it that way, we'd have to pay the money on the bonds, right? This way, we're not paying any money on the bonds for the 10 years to the port. This seems like the better deal to me.
Right. Well, we're paying the 140,000, right?
Yeah, but nothing else.
Oh, you're saying not the interest on it.
Right. This seems the 10 years, 1.4 mil sounds like a good deal to me.
I concur.
I agree.
Okay.
The only question I'd make sure is, if we wanted to pay it off early, because I think our income receipts are probably going to be a little higher, but I don't think anybody's going to object to that.
Yeah, as long as there's not a prepayment penalty clause in there, I think we should be okay.
There is no prepayment penalty clause.
Okay.
Brian, I've been searching on my other screen. Did we get a copy of that agreement? Are you still working on it? So we didn't circulate it. I don't see the actual agreement. I mean, I see it on the screen when you put it up, but I was trying to scroll through it myself and I couldn't find it.
Which is,
Since I got the final draft this afternoon reflecting my last rounds of comments, I don't know if Mike got it out to you. Really, we were down to this issue in 5.2 that we're discussing now. And then the other kind of final changes were, for bigger purposes, were not material. I thought their exhibits A and B were a little bit too skinny compared to what we had asked of the other partners. And so, late today, I got an expanded Schedule A and Schedule B, which, defines the project, defines the tasks.
this is the new attachment A, which gives much more detail in the description of the project. The Community Event Center, which is the public portion of that, including parking areas.
I guess I'd like to ask, what's the question at hand today?
Seems like me that they have agreed on the 0% interest, and the question is, do we want to stick to our guns on 10 years or arm wrestle them over 5 years versus 10 years or something in between? And I think we should stick to 10 years.
I concur.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess, Brian, one other question is there a timetable by which these funds, if for some reason they don't get going within by X date or so? I'm just thinking back to the parks issue from a couple of years ago when they didn't do anything. So now we've got those funds back. I mean, I know that the Port of Bremerton and the track is racing, so to speak. They want to get off the ground and get moving. I just, if for some bizarre reason, COVID or otherwise, because we live in these times, it takes longer than expected. So there we go. Okay.
This is the timeline that they've proposed for the activities that this funding would cover.
Good.
If you notice, it actually goes all the way out into the end of 2021. And then the other item was about the costs, and it's difficult because it's way down in the bottom. Let's see if I can.
Mike, it's the two blue
Yeah,
colored line items. We asked them to identify more clearly what the cost items were. They've taken their spreadsheet and highlighted through the blue coloring the cost items that are covered by the IOA.
this sheet of costs covers the whole public portion of it and the grand total of the construction, all the preparation and the construction. The amount that they're requesting is for the design fee and the construction document fees for the overall facility at 1.4 million.
I too would say we should hold to 10 years. I also would say that we all need to read this document and to look it over before taking any other action. And so I'd like to give Jim Rothland an opportunity to speak as well. But are there any other concerns from the board that we would like to discuss before we hear from Jim?
I think Ann Montgomery wanted to speak too.
Well, like I said, I'm. What is on the agenda in front of us? What decision do we have to make tonight?
There is
The
no
first time I've seen this document.
there is no detailed part on the agenda for what we're being asked to do, besides to bring up this 5-year versus 10-year piece and to have any initial conversations. Since it is a document that came to us specifically by us, I mean Mike and Brian this afternoon. We are putting it before us just to have this discussion since none of the board have been able to see the document for themselves.
So I guess I think my only question would be, would there be pertinent information for me to know in making a decision between 5 and 10 years?
Jim, would you like to speak to that, or Ann, give you a chance to share with us?
I'm going to defer to Jim Rothland at this point.
Okay. I'm here. I'm not sure why my camera is not. I don't know if that's me or you, Mike, but it's not really dark in my room. And June 30th is the day I think we're going to get out of this COVID so that we can do July 4th on the water this year. So there's my 2 cents. Anyway, yeah, I appreciate the time. Appreciate you looking this over. It was a lot of back and forth with the attorney to try to get it done. It's unfortunate we couldn't have got it in your hands sooner, so you had a chance to visualize everything. But it sounds like it really comes down to the 10 years or 5 years. And, you know, for us, 10 years makes it a lot harder without any kind of an interest return. So we thought we could compromise and get it down to 5 and then, you know, save everybody on the interest. You know, for us, this money is important because if we have it tied up, then we can't invest it in bringing more jobs in. And as I look at that spreadsheet, that I understand the numbers, it's just, I think there's so much uncertainty in there. I think there's a lot of, there's some risk there about really leaving a lot of money sitting out there on the table on the PFD side if these projects don't start on the time that they hope to. I like the idea, and I hope you guys will consider that if something happens and the projects that you have in there for estimates on the time frame, if they start to push themselves out, that you have that option to go ahead and fund the rest of the port project in a more timely manner. That's really what I've got to say, but everything else I think is going to work for us. We're focused on funding everything on the public side of this project, and we're looking forward to getting this thing started. It's been a dream for a long time for the Circuits of the Northwest, and I really like the public side that they've added to it, and I think the community will as well.
All right. Well, I think at this point then to get this document into the board's hands, and would anybody else like to ask a question? Otherwise, I'd just say, hey, there you are, Jim. Hello.
Yeah. It was the light switch.
But one of the reasons for having this conversation tonight was to simply have that 5-year versus 10-year discussion to give direction to Brian and Mike for continuing to finalize the document.
So I guess my question would be, so what happens now from a time perspective, Darren? Are we another month away before we can get this approved? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Would you like to do a formal vote of the board for the 5 versus 10 years? For those who would like to see it stay at 10 years, can you just raise your hands to give an indication of that?
So we're doing a formal vote on this, or just doing a hand?
Just a hand raise. We're not voting on this ILA tonight, but this was to give an understanding of where the board was, and so I think that gives a clear understanding of where the board is together.
Sure.
So is the port willing to do 10 years?
Well, I mean, it's, what we're waiting is just so I can officially take it back to the commissioners. Pat, I'd say, I can't speak for the commission, but I don't see this as, I don't think it's something that they're going to stop this project. We'll find a way to do it that way. So we need to.
Would we be able to vote that if it goes through as 10 years, could we vote on that now to get it started? I don't know if that's something we can do.
Yeah, is there a way, Brian, that they can make a vote now and then say based on that change, and then it makes it good, or how does that work?
Yeah, and do we even vote on ILAs, or aren't they just the product of what we've already voted on?
Let me jump in here. Aaron, no, the board always votes on the ILA. That's
after it's been drafted. Okay.
Right, that's the final act. Your prior decision was you made a decision on some business points, and then you directed the staff to work on the ILA. So that's what we've done and brought back to you. And for my purposes, wrapping this agreement up, you could have a vote on what you thought the appropriate terms were, or as Darren started to do, you could just give, Mike Walton and I a sense of the board, and we can go from there.
Well, I like Pat's idea. If we can vote on it now and approve it, then all that needs to be done, right, is the paperwork and the signatures, right? We don't have to.
I move to approve the ILA with the inclusion of the 10-year repayment period, subject to the final format and approval of our attorney.
I guess my concern is, and this is just me being a conservative lawyer, but I think, I know the general terms, but I just saw that, portions of this agreement as Brian scrolled through it, from a draft today. I don't want to make them wait a month to do this. And I understand they're chomping at the bit to get going. Because I don't ever like to, approve something that I haven't read and fully understand. So that's just my, 2 cents on that.
Phil, hey, wait a second, John. We have a motion on the board by Walt. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
All right. So then let's have discussion now on that motion. And so, okay. Phil, we've heard you, John.
I'm in agreement with Phil. I haven't read any of the attachments, just as we have with our other ILAs. What are the deliverables, those types of things. I hate to hold them up, but nothing's going to stop them from bonding ahead of that either. I will say that. And I think I'd like to add that I would be favorable to any terms of early repayment, even though we're asking them, we want the flexibility for a 10-year term. It would be my hope that if we could do it in 2 years, we'd do it. But I'd like to reserve that flexibility because we don't know what all the rest of our projects are going to look like.
Any other discussion? I think it would set very bad precedent for us to vote on an ILA before we have read an ILA, even though I understand the spirit of we've been talking about this for a while. We know that it's a certain amount. We're talking about 5 years versus 10 years, but none of us have read the rest of the documents, which we thank Brian for his good work. We thank Mike for his good work, but without the board reading those documents, I don't think that's a good decision.
Well, Brian, are there any substantive changes in this version and the one that we've seen previously, other than addressing the issue of the time period and the interest rate?
Well, basically, no. Every one of our ILAs starts out as a template where we try to have uniformity as much as possible. Everyone has a tweak here and there, but if they were substantive and material, I would flag those for you. So overall, this fits in the template of what we've done before. That said, from my end, and representing the board as a whole, I appreciate that someone like you has seen multiple ILAs, and someone like John and Phil, this may be their first one. So I have to respect their desire and their professionalism to make sure that they've read what they're going to be approving and voting on.
Gee, I guess you put me in my place, didn't you?
How do we proceed here formally? Walt, would you like to call for a vote? Okay. For those who would like to approve the ILA at this point in time with the terms that we know, please say aye.
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 And those who would like to not vote for the ILA at this point with the terms that we know, please say no.
No.
Nay.
No. Just,
All
just for the record, though, for minutes, just to be clear, it's a procedural thing. We're not disapproving the ILA. We're, saying
Correct.
It's premature, so that's
correct.
Yeah. Just don't
Thank
want
you.
someone in a year's time reading it as we rejected the ILA.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Ann, Axel, Stacy. All right, we'll now move on to the approval of the construction consultant agreement. Mike, could you bring in Shannon?
Yep, I will do that in just a moment. I'm making the shuffle now. Okay. I'll bring Shannon in and you guys can get acquainted and introduce yourselves while I clean up the rest of any people that are still shown in our hosts, our speakers. Let's see.
Brian, if I could ask you, while we're waiting as Mike moves people in and out, are there any items with the contract agreement that we should, or the consultant agreement that we should still know about or be discussing? We're just approving what we've been working on now for a couple of months here with Shannon, correct?
Correct.
Right. So our basic services contract is a form or template. Excuse me, I have a barking dog. That we've been using for many years. We periodically tweak it and update it. We did that with Shannon. Shannon had no substantive comments or changes. So the document as drafted in form conforms to what we've traditionally used, and there's no changes there.
Welcome, Shannon. Any comments that you'd like to take before we take a motion to approve this contract?
No, I've read through the contract. I signed it, and the only thing I think that we have outstanding, and once it's signed and fully executed, is my insurance company will send over a certificate of insurance for the file.
Yeah, stop.
Yeah, the last time that we looked at this, we didn't have the updated costs, and Shannon had supplied the table for the costs for he and the rest of his team, and that was incorporated into the final version, and that's what we're asking to approve tonight.
Yeah, and Cynthia's on the line also. She's my coordinator.
On the line, or she's in the...
She's on the Zoom meeting. Her name's Cynthia.
Okay, hang on just a minute, and I will get Cynthia in here with us. There she is.
Cynthia works closely with me. She's my right-hand person. She's a coordinator on everything that I touch, so she's a real helpful hand. There she is.
Welcome, Cynthia. Well, we get all the technology figured out here. Can we have a motion to approve this consulting agreement?
I'll move to approve the consulting agreement.
I'll second it.
Who was
Thank
that?
you. We'll give it to Tom. He
Tom.
spoke louder. All right. All those in favor say, or any discussion, excuse me, any
Thank you.
discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. 4.2 addresses conflicting engagement, but I don't see where we add any schedule of any of our existing projects or people that we work with that describe that to Shannon. Do we have that somewhere? Is that a living document or anything that would know he's not doing work for somebody who's receiving our funds or et cetera?
Excellent.
Is that something we need to add or?
Yeah, so what you're saying is basically, I couldn't consult for them if you were supplying funds to that project.
Correct, right? So, I mean, it reads, can be in direct conflict with the interest of the PFD. Right. So how do you know who we are or not interacting with if we don't provide you a schedule of that?
Yeah, and I think Walt is, he provided 3 projects, but now it seems like there's 4, so.
Yeah. Just complicates it a little bit.
Yeah. It's all
So
good.
Brian, should we have another document?
I think that's a great idea, and I don't think it's another piece of paper, but I think it's maybe just another schedule that we attach to the contract that basically is our disclosure of who our other projects are.
Yeah, and you know, that happens all the time to where we're updating things as that contract goes, because as an on-call with you, you know, this is an ongoing situation and your projects are not going to be the same. So we would just update that document and say, hey, Shannon, these are the new projects. And I could initial it and we can incorporate that back into our contract. So.
Yeah, it's really more of a protection for you. I just don't want you to be doing business with somebody that you didn't even know we were working with. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So would you amend that, Aaron, to include the new schedule that we will supply for those partners that we are currently working with?
Do you mean Brian?
Is that a friendly amendment? I thought, Aaron, you had brought the motion forward.
I think John
did.
Probably, yeah.
John did.
Well, yeah. So I bring an amendment if you're amenable to that. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. We can vote on that amendment in and of itself.
All right.
I think if the port wants to add a schedule of the current projects they have into the current contract document and maybe of some verbiage that future contracts will be updated in there, I'd be happy to initial that as part of the contract. That's not a problem.
All right.
So
we'll first vote on the amendment that will include that schedule. So all those in favor of including that schedule, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. All right. So the motion has been amended, and now we'll vote on the motion with that amendment that the schedule will be included with the consulting agreement. So all those in favor of the consulting agreement that we have before us with Shannon, please say aye.
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 And all those opposed, nay. All right. Shannon, we're very thankful that we have you to guide us as we go through these new projects. And we look forward to getting to know both you and Cynthia better. And thank you for the work that you will do.
Yeah, we're excited to get started. You know, it's been a long process.
Oh, yeah, it has.
COVID, it seems like we started this last February or last January, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
And COVID hit and everything went awry. So we're excited to get started and we're excited to be part of your team.
All right. Thank you. And nice to meet you, Cynthia. All right, we'll move on to number 5C, which is the approval of our legal services agreement.
Darren, this is Walt. If I could interrupt you.
Yes.
I'm about to run out of juice here. I'm plugged in, but I don't know if I'm going to stay online or not.
All right. Well, Walt, for our last item of the night, we very much need you because you're the person who is going to open that executive session as the host of it. So if you can get your power source in place.
Well, but I am. My power source is in place, but I'm at 10%, and I don't know if it'll keep up or not.
Okay. I hear you. All right. Well, we'll see what happens.
I'll yell if it gets to 5%. Maybe it'll hold its own.
Thank you for that notice. Let's move quickly. Mike, will you tell us about the approval of the legal services agreement with Brian?
This is just a refresh, if you will. There was a provision in the agreement that allowed us to go forward for another year, just to re-up. It's not a new agreement at all, but just to change it back. I mean, to include it for one more year. Very simple.
Right. I see that there's a question by Hank Anderson. It is called Barker Creek Consulting.
Yes.
And so just to answer your question, Hank, and then I'd also like to note for our present discussion with the approval of legal services agreement, for the board members who aren't aware of this, that I wanted to recognize that Brian has given us a reduced rate throughout his time with us because of his being part of our community. And this is his kind of work that he does to give back to the community. And that rate has stayed the same too for 7 years. And so I wanted to recognize that and thank Brian for that. And thank you for the good work you've done for us. Can I have a motion to approve this legal services agreement, the continuation of it?
So moved.
Thank you, Phil. A second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, all those, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving our legal services agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. We have approved the agreement. Brian, we're grateful to you and glad to be working with you again for the coming year.
Very
Okay.
good feeling. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Is this going to be the pre-retirement year, Brian, or do you know yet?
It's year to year, Mike.
Okay.
My young man business plan had me retiring 12 years ago.
Don't let me hear those things.
Okay, we're going to move on to item number 6, financial reports, going into the monthly reports. And Mike, would you guide us through that?
Yeah, let's see here. All right, I think that's up on your screen now. This is the tax rebate revenue summary. And I need to move you guys on the other side. Okay. And we received 1.8 million this year, 1.839 for 2286. Anyway, it's about 2.8% over last year. So even with the 3 red months in the middle of the year, we wound up with more revenue than we did last year. The debt service for this month was almost $70,000. The expenses were a little under 11,000, so another 83,000 plus that went to our cash reserves. Any questions about that? And I did make it larger, Aaron, so that
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Though I do have another request since you did that. Thank you. Is could you put back the column that's got the January through December in? Just so at the very far left, so we know what for sure what months we're looking at. I know I should be able to just read across, but I would prefer over in column. Wait a minute, I moved us in front of column U.
For future times.
Yeah, for future times. Yeah.
Yeah, I can, excuse me, in the future, I think I can freeze that column.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Okay, go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
That's okay. This is the December profit and loss budget performance. And this is basically for the 968 operations fund. And that shows the 10,000 that I mentioned for the expenses. And over in the right-hand column is the total for the year. The original budget was $228,900, and we actually spent just a little under 179,000.
Now, wait a minute, I have a question about that because according to this, we actually spent 407. And I was going to ask that because we've got a couple of big entries under construction consulting for $95,000 where we had budgeted 10, and then we have 178,000 under professional services that didn't have a budget. I was going to ask what those are. That's why that's a negative 178. So let's see. 541, sorry, it's dark in here. 5415A, construction consulting. So you scroll up a little bit more. Okay, it's a year-to-date number. Actually, this screen shows it right here. So.
Are you talking the 5419?
Yeah, so both of them. There's 5419A professional services year-to-date for 177,000 with nothing budgeted. So we're off by 178,000 there. Yeah, right where you're at. So that was a question I had as to what was that. And then right above it, you've got construction consulting for 95,000. And we had a $10,000 budget. So we're off by 85,000 there. But without a general ledger, I don't know what those were.
That's the budget as opposed to the actual.
Well, that's the actual column, is it not? Or is that the budget column?
That's the budget column, this number here.
On the right, but where it says January through December 20th, when you drop down from there, those are actual numbers, correct? There? Yeah, those are actual, and then the numbers to the right are the budget. So like at least the way I'm reading it, 95,000 was an actual and the budget was 10,000. So there's just something coded off to that I don't know what.
Well, I'll check and see because there shouldn't be any entry in there at all for construction consulting.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. And then we also need to check on the professional services for 178,000.
Yeah, I'll check with Susan on that because, yeah, that's not right. Okay.
Yeah, could you report back to us on what those are so we know what our end of year is?
Mike, I want to make sure that you heard Aaron on that you'll report back to us on
I did.
those numbers.
I was making a note about that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Let's move on to, are there any other questions with the financials?
The only other note I might make on this sheet is in the the 977 holding fund. That balance now at the end of the year was 3.6 million.
Yeah.
I'd used the number earlier in one of the
3.4,
calculations at 3.3, so that's up to 3.6.
All right. On to the blanket voucher.
Yeah, this is the blanket voucher for this month. This was frozen in the packet before I updated this with accountability plus bookkeeping charge of 600 and one second. $641.25, which actually brings the total of this up to $4,373.78 is what you'll be approving.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the voucher?
Sure, I'll move it.
Thank you,
Second.
Phil. Thank you, Tom. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, on to the project vouchers.
Yeah, and this is for the Paulsbo project. This is 765 was for November, 771 was for December. So the total of those two is $29,829.68.
All right, can I have a motion to approve this voucher?
So moved.
Thank you, John. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Aaron. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the motion, the voucher for the perk, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. All right. Actually, was that the Port Orchard?
No, that was Paulsbo.
Okay, all right. We have the numbers opposite in our agenda packet. The voucher for Port Orchard then, if you can put that before us.
We don't have a voucher for Port Orchard.
Okay, all right.
The first agenda that I generated had two numbers in there, one for each, and it turns out both of them were for, I'd forgotten that it was November and the December voucher, and so that was corrected on all of the subsequent agendas. And for the one that you had before you earlier tonight, that was correct.
Will you put the updated agenda back up on the screen, Mike?
Yep, hang on one second here. I'll stop that. And come on, share. There. Okay.
All right, so we're now at item number 7, ongoing business. For the activity report and the regional facilities report, I would direct you to read those and make yourself aware of those. And at this point, I would like to move us into executive session. The board is going into executive session as authorized by RCW 42.30.110 1G to evaluate the performance of a public employee. The executive session will last for 30 minutes, and then we will come back here.
I am starting the executive session now.
Mike, why don't we wait on that? Just to be careful, can we, we'll all get off is the process we'll use. And Walt is the co-host of that, correct? Just to make sure we don't end this meeting. And Walt can start that session, and then all of us can log on to it. And all of you.
Wait, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Okay. What you need to do is look at your email, or I can give you the numbers right now and you can write them down.
Is this a different meeting?
It is a different Zoom meeting, correct. And that session would, are you ready?
Yes, go.
Now, if you give that out over the public, anybody else will be able to join that.
You can't do that, Mike. Thank you, John. Walt, we all have an email in our public facilities district email. So why don't you just check that quick and make sure that you have it, since you're the one who has to start the meeting.
Yeah, and there's no link there. It's just the numbers, so it's not a one-click thing.
Yeah, all of you are logged into Zoom now, as is Walt.
And so what each of us will do is we will leave this meeting. Mike is going to stay in this meeting with any of the attendees who would like to stay and wait. But I would direct just that when we return from our meeting, we will simply be adjourning the meeting.
I don't know how to get to that without getting off of this one.
Yep,
I got one screen.
I understand that. Well, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to propose is that for the board, we will all leave the meeting now, and Brian will join us in that executive session too. Walt, I'm going to call you and just guide you through starting that. And then once the room becomes available in 2 minutes for the rest of the board, you should be able to put that code into a new Zoom meeting, right? You'll have to do what Aaron said and use the code that you've received.
Let me suggest, though, that it be somebody else other than me, because I'm also down to 5% on my tablet.
Can you, Pat is also named as a host, right, for the PFD? Can you switch him to co-host, Mike?
Well, let me see if I can do that.
That's a great idea, Walt. And Pat, we're putting you on the spot, but are you willing to do that?
I'm willing. I'm not sure. So I just go in and start that meeting, right? With a new.
Yep. And you'll be the one who's controlling it. You basically start it. That allows all of us to join that room, and then you'll close that meeting when we're done.
Okay.
Hang on. I can't do Pat.
Brian, a question. Since this is executive session, the reason why I can't do this is because I run another Zoom account separate from the PFD, and Zoom has not created the ability for someone to be one of the main people on two different accounts. Is it fine? Is there anything wrong with me using the account that I have to start another meeting and simply send that link to the rest of the board in a new email.
Okay, I have been able to link to add to put in John Morrissey as a co-host.
Okay, I saw the email that just came through. Let me just log off here, and if I have issues, I'll call you, Darren.
Okay, sounds good. So the rest of the board, we'll now leave the meeting and give John a minute, and then we will join the new meeting, which you have an email for in your inbox.
And I'll pause the recording on the existing meeting.